The teaser trailer for the long-awaited Obi-Wan Kenobi series dropped last week, and naturally it got everyone talking. Whether it be the amazing choice of having the Duel of Fates background track to really pull you into the prequel vibe this series is going for, the great-looking sets like the dark and grimy urban planet Deo, or the Fortress Inquisitorius from the Jedi Fallen Order game. Or seeing young Uncle Owen and Luke Skywalker, or just an aged Ewan as Obi-Wan wandering the desert on Tatooine, which, while a super simple thing, it's still something people have longed to see nonetheless, and they finally have it here. But the teaser wasn't all positive comments, as there were some bits here that not everyone was super stoked about, myself included. And interestingly enough, it was all regarding the Alien Inquisitors. More specifically, the Alien Inquisitors who've appeared before in other media, and this being their live-action portrayal, which, suffice to say, did not translate all that well. And honestly, this has got me a little worried for the future when it comes to this sort of stuff. As I don't know about you, but unfortunately there has been sort of a pattern with Lucasfilm having trouble properly adapting alien characters from other media into live action. It all started in The Mandalorian Season 2 with Ahsoka Tano's live-action debut, where there was a debate regarding the size of Ahsoka's Leku and Montrals, which understandably were quite small and short, resembling more so the size of them when Ahsoka was still a teenager during the Clone Wars. But of course, later in Rebels, they grew by quite a lot to naturally show that she's an adult now and no longer a kid. So to see Ahsoka in Mando Season 2, who at this point is even older but still have child-sized Montrals and Leku, was incredibly odd. Especially for a series that to date was doing a killer job in accurately portraying things that were from other Star Wars media. Now, the main excuse and, well, argument from those defending this was that this design change was needed due to all the movement Ahsoka had in the episode, which by all means is a fair thing to say, but at the same time could have easily been neutralized had they used CGI for the Leku and Montral, as in that way it would allow for even greater freedom of movement for Ahsoka's actress, Rosario Dawson, while at the same time keeping her Leku and Montral sizes as canon accurate as possible. But for whatever reason, they didn't go with that, and we got what we got. This, in retrospect, was incredibly mild for what was to come next. As in the Book of Boba Fett, we were then introduced to a live-action depiction of Pykes, and that understandably generated some mixed feelings within the fan community. The Pykes, which were a fan-favorite alien from the Clone Wars TV series, had always quite a unique look to them. They were usually lanky, semi-barefoot, and had long, large, dynamic heads and necks along with 3 fingers and 2 front-faced whiskers, which made them really stand out from a lot of the other aliens in the Star Wars universe. Their faces were also something too, featuring small noses and mouths, while having big, different colored large eyes that, again, really stood out. We've also seen Pykes in other media like the comics, which tended to depict the characters more realistically than how they look like in the cartoons, and the Pykes looked exactly as how you'd expect them to. More or less, they looked exactly like they did in the Clone Wars, but with a more realistic tone to them. They still had their big heads, their big eyes, noses, long necks, 3 fingers, and so on. In addition to this, there was also a Pyke live-action concept made by Colin Fix a while ago, which, while it wasn't perfect, it still had a lot of the features that made the Pykes unique, and as such had them look real intimidating, as they should given their design. After all, the Pykes were one of the most unique-looking alien species in the Clone Wars. And, well, it's safe to say Lucasfilm really botched up their depiction when going into live action. As while it's true that the first ever so-called Pike in live action was actually Quay Tolstite in Solo, but I personally never considered him as a true portrayal of what a Pike in live action should look like. And that's mainly due to him being part cyborg, such as having robotic arms and, well, missing half of his head. So when I heard we'd get to see real Pikes in the Book of Boba Fett, I was excited. Until I saw them, that is. There, the Pykes at least weren't missing half their head like Quay did. But at the same time, there was a lot of inconsistencies and just overall errors made in their design. First of all, the faces just did not resemble the Pykes at all, rather more so some type of fish people. The eyes were no longer the most prominent facial feature on their faces, also, of course, lacking different eye colors like bright purple for example. But the mouth was about as large as the eyes now. Then there's also the lack of a nose, which Pykes always had, as well as now having 4 whiskers instead of 2. In addition to that, where the head shape was improved over Quay and Solo, it now had a strange pattern all over it, along with a change of color which would make it visually stand out from the face, almost making it look like some sort of helmet, rather than organically part of the head like the Clone Wars Pykes had. Not to mention, of course, the lack of a long alien-like necks, which now have just become double chins that anyone on a diet of fast food with no exercise could easily achieve. But that was only just a tip of the iceberg, as rather than have 3 long fingers and slender bodies, the Pykes were now given 5 normal-sized human fingers and a human physique, which topped with them also no longer being semi-barefoot really, in my opinion, destroyed the most unique-looking alien vibe that they previously had. Because now they just look like humans with a fish face mask on, and that's about it. Now, I still don't know to this day on why Lucasfilm went with this route of the Pike depiction. And based on some examples from the show, it could easily just be due to them cutting corners or laziness, which honestly is quite unfortunate, as we all know of how much more capable Lucasfilm is than this. And as a result, this now only causes problems like, do Pykes have noses or 3 fingers in canon? Or no noses and 5 human-sized fingers like as seen in the Book of Boba Fett? Now, the main argument here that I've always seen is that the Pykes looked the way that they did in the Clone Wars series was because it was a stylistic choice in the art style. And that's why they look vastly different in live action, almost like a brand new species. Which, for me, is a weak and honestly lazy excuse at this point, as changing body features, like for example adding more whiskers and fingers or removing a nose, is not stylistic by any means. It's literally designing a whole different alien race at this point, which they pretty much did and are hoping no one would notice. But funny enough, the Pykes weren't the only aliens that Lucasfilm had trouble getting right, as Cad Bane's appearance actually garnered a lot of attention from the Star Wars community, surprisingly even more so than the Pykes for some reason. The main issue with Cad being really only with the minor but different placement and size of his facial features. Which, while I completely understand why fans had problems with this, I personally thought he looked fine compared to the Pykes at least, who by far look like the worst thing in the entire show. Now with the Obi-Wan trailer, we've got similar issues with the Alien Inquisitor rendition in live action, specifically the Grand Inquisitor and the Fifth Brother. The Grand Inquisitor's alien species was Pau'an, which debuted in Revenge of the Sith, so we already had a good and firm look of how they generally look like in canon. In addition to this, there are depictions in other media of how the Grand Inquisitor was supposed to look like in a more realistic fashion, like in the video game Star Wars Force Arena, which in itself is supposed to be canon in how it depicts its characters. Unfortunately, the Grand Inquisitor that we get in Kenobi does not look anything like this, instead sharing more similarities to the likes of Pinhead or Megamind if anything. Furthermore, to show the clear lack of paying attention to the source material, the Grand Inquisitor is also missing his glowing reddish-yellow dark side eyes that he's known for. As seen in the comics, he's had them already a year after Order 66, so why he doesn't have them here in the Kenobi series, which is 10 years afterwards, but later gets them again as seen in Rebels, we don't know. This is no doubt a strange omission that could easily be fixed with some CGI. In addition, he's also missing his sharp teeth, which again is odd as that's another physical feature that makes him stand out. Top that all off with his shorter, rounder, bulbous head, and this really makes the Grand Inquisitor look more like a cosplay than a real serious live-action depiction of how he's supposed to look like in canon. But of course, the Grand Inquisitor isn't the only character that suffered a poor translation from animation to live action, as there's also the fifth brother, which in my opinion is the worst one of all. For me, he looks nothing like the fifth brother, and this is largely due to miscasting, as I think having an Asian actor was the wrong choice here. Like we've seen him in Rebels and other media, there is really nothing that I've seen that would suggest a fifth brother in having any Asian facial features. As similar to the Grand Inquisitor, he's got a slimmer head shape, long prominent chin, sharp teeth with large grayish eyes. Based on everything we've seen of him, especially with his live-action depiction in Force Arena, I would sooner had casted a black or Hispanic actor for the role, as Sung Kang here makes this look more like a cosplay, again like the Grand Inquisitor, than making us believe that this is how the fifth brother is truly supposed to look like. Now, in addition to the face, another thing that I really dislike when it comes to the fifth brother is his physique and height. For starters, the fifth brother is really tall, if not the tallest character that appeared in Rebels. And his actor, Sung Kang, in the Kenobi series is only 183 centimeters. Same height as I am, and even I know I would make for a terrible cosplay as I'm lacking the proper height to make a convincing fifth brother. To add to that, the fifth brother is also quite bulky too, which together with his height gives him an imposing presence. And which, based on the teaser trailer, Sung Kang definitely does not seem to have that. He's too short and lacking muscle, then throw in the mismatching facial features, and so far he makes for a terrible live-action fifth brother. Now, granted, we still have yet to see Kenobi and are merely using limited footage here to make our arguments. But like I've been saying in this video already, given Lucasfilm's poor track record of depicting aliens from animation to live action, I honestly can't say I have much faith it will get any better. Which is something I truly have no pleasure in saying, as I love Star Wars and only want the best for it. But for me, if I see something below subpar and below quality, especially in my favorite franchise, I have to call it out. My personal motto here is if you can't get it right, then don't do it at all until you can. Which, unfortunately, is not the motto Lucasfilm seemed to be following here. Regardless, like with The Mandalorian or the Book of Boba Fett, I'll watch Obi-Wan and enjoy it for all of its good qualities. But for its lackluster live-action alien depictions, I'll have to keep pinching my arm to remind myself that no, I'm not watching a low-budget fan film, but a real-deal Lucasfilm-produced series.